Commission for the City of Grand Rapids on May 9, 2024. We will proceed through our agenda with we have 3 cases scheduled for today, but one applicant has requested to postpone their case. That's the 1700 28th Street. So we will have a public hearing for anyone who came to speak on that case, but we won't be presenting or discussing that case today. The way we proceed through our cases is we have a city planner present the case to us, take any questions, and then we have the applicant add any additional detail that they would like. And then we open up the public hearing for any member of the public to come up and state their name and have up to 3 minutes to share their thoughts. Then we invite the applicant back up and then turn to our own deliberations to make our decisions. We are prepared by the city staff with some draft resolution language, both for and against each case. And so sometimes we are reading resolutions, but we do have a choice in the matter. Are there any conflicts of interest from any of the planning commissioners that they would like to disclose?
I do know Lawrence Stetler, but he's never given me a dime, so I think I can safely make a decision.
Yeah, that's about right.
That is true.
Blood, sweat, and tears, but come on.
Hearing none, we'll begin.
The first item on the agenda is 385 Leonard Street Northeast. The applicant is proposing construction of a approximately 186 unit, 5-story apartment building with a commercial component on the same parcel as the existing Sun Title office building with some shared uses on the site. A parking waiver is also requested. Along with the Sun Title offices, the YMCA of Greater Grand Rapids uses a previously existing commercial kitchen, both of which will continue, both Sun Title and the YMCA commercial kitchen use. And the reason that this is going forward to the Planning Commission today is because the property is currently zoned NOS, Neighborhood Office Service, and the Neighborhood Office Service could not support the project as proposed, both from a density standpoint as well as height. And this also would facilitate the mixed uses on the site. The property is zoned NOS, as I mentioned, and we've got residential to the north and east, medium low density residential. We have Mary Waters Park and Grand Rapids Public School to the south, and I believe this school is slated to be closed. To the west, we have St. Alphonsus Church. And we have a couple of zone districts there. To the west of Lafayette is the MDR zone district, mixed density residential, and that does allow a higher density of residential uses than would be found in the TN LDR, low density residential zone district. The park to the south is zoned office space. As I mentioned, Sun Title occupies the existing improvements on the site. And I want to tell you a little bit about what used to be on the site, this building. And we did some quick research this morning, a couple of us planners along with archives, and we found that it was the St. John's Orphan Asylum, and it was actually where the Sun Title building is. Now. We had assumed it was over on the west part of the site where this new building is proposed, but that is not true. We could not find any buildings ever being constructed there. So it looked that St. John's Orphan Home had several additions over time, and it looked like this. It was pretty amazing. And Yeah, so anyway, this is what was on the site previously. It was a pretty substantial building, and it was fairly tall. So we just wanted to show you. And this is what is being proposed today. Now, this is also a substantial building, and this is proposed on that west side of the site, the vacant part of the site, which we think never has been improved. And it ranges between 4 and 5 stories in height because of the grade. And the matter of the grade is really a substantial part of the story here, which the applicant can cover much better than me, but that does influence the design of the building. The entire property that includes, pardon me, the entire property that includes the existing improvements on the site is about 3.4 acres, and the existing building is about 30,000 square feet. It's pretty sizable, and it has 58 parking spaces. There are retaining walls around because of the grade change. And I do want to point out that in the past, up until 2021, this site was zoned TN-LDR, like the property around it. And that's because it was the, St. John's Home, and then Hope Network bought it, but it was really kind of an institutional use. It was residential, but it was institutional. So TN-LDR was appropriate, and Sun Title wanted to occupy, purchase the site and occupy the building, and NOS was an appropriate rezoning, and so they've been using it since then. So a 5-story courtyard-style building is proposed on the site. It will vary between an appearance of 4 stories and 5 stories, depending on where on the site you are. You can see it's tallest at the corner of Leonard and Lafayette, and then this slide is showing the Carrier side on the north, where it's 4 stories. And there are some berms around it to transition the grades, and it does have a courtyard in the middle, which will include amenities for residents of the building. A service area is on the east side of the building, between the Sun Title building and the proposed building. That will be for refuse removal, and this will also be the location where folks will, this is the move-in area, the loading zone for move-ins. Actually, I'm going to go back here. At the corner of Lafayette and Leonard is a small commercial component, about 622 square feet. The applicant intends to have it utilized as a coffee shop, at least initially. Relative to parking, parking is proposed in an underground, well, partially underground deck. That's what you can see at this lower level. And this slide is showing the Lafayette side, and approximately in the middle is the proposed access to the parking garage. And I do want to mention that the location of the parking garage entrance, that was actually that was actually decided with input from Mobile GR. We wanted to ensure that it was safe and appropriate, and the applicant did work with city staff on the current location. And that parking level will provide 78 spaces, as well as some bike parking spaces. The plans themselves show 181 dwelling units. However, the applicant is asking for approval of up to 186 units. And that would allow them some flexibility for reconfiguration of units depending on market demand. I should mention that the parking analysis was based on that higher number. 86 of the proposed units are, if we're going on the 181 units, as the plans are shown, 86 of the units are proposed to be studios of about 400 square feet. And by our definition, those would be micro units. 91 are proposed to be one-bedroom units of 520 to about 650 square feet, and then 4 two-bedroom units are proposed with 900 square feet each. The units are proposed to have a balcony or a porch, most of them at least. There'll be a lounge, and the Sun Title building does have a large gym, and as it was a children's home, and I understand that use of that gym space is proposed for the residents, and the applicant can talk about, how that will be outfitted. I'm sure it will be a fitness gym for use of those residents. There are a couple of things I do want to talk about before I turn it over to the applicant. These would be the front, the setbacks. This site for this building has 3 front yards. Anywhere that's abutting a street is a front. So they've got front on Leonard, Lafayette, and Carrier. Now, the NOS zone district has a minimum setback of 25 feet. It actually doesn't have an RBL, a required building line, as we generally see in the TN zone district. Additionally, institutional uses, like maybe a church, doesn't have an RBL. They have a minimum setback. So as we're talking about this, and as you're thinking about this, you might keep that in mind. So in the packet, you will see that on Leonard Street, a setback of 20 feet from back of curb is proposed. The existing Sun Title building is about 30 feet. So it's a bit closer. On Lafayette, the St. Alphonsus building is about 30 feet from back of curb, and they're proposing a range of 19 to 23 feet. So, again, about 20 feet there. But because, I'm assuming it's because of maybe the road isn't aligned correctly, it varies according to the location on the site. And then Carrier Street. Now, Carrier Street is where we've got residential uses across the street. And on the north side of the street, there's a required building line or an established building line of those homes of about 28 feet. And the Sun Title building's 23 feet, and they're proposing 30 feet. So the Planning Commission should please look at what's surrounding and determine if the proposed setbacks are appropriate. I do want to correct something that I have in the staff report. I neglected to add that in TN districts, which is what surrounds this property, the Planning Commission can go to a setback to the lot line of 0 feet. And you may notice that there is, down at the southwest corner, we have a setback from the lot line of about 2.5 feet. It's 19 feet from back of curve, which is what we use when we're talking about a required building line. But for the purposes of the PRD, it's about 2.4 feet and 6.7 feet, 9.6 feet, so and 10.7 feet. So in sum, the Planning Commission does have the discretion to allow the setbacks as proposed. I'd like to talk a little bit about green space. PRDs have a fairly low green space requirement of 15%. The NOS for residential projects, 30%, and 20% for mixed use. The applicant's proposing 29.8%. I would ask that the Planning Commission establish a number that we can go on in the future in case some slight changes need to be made. In the draft resolution, I suggested 25%. That gives them a little bit of wiggle room if they need to add some more sidewalk or something like that. But they are proposing 29.8%. So if you want to go with that, you could as well. Additionally, tree canopy, residential, the NOS zone district requires 26%, the PRD 12, the applicant is proposing 34.8. So again, I suggested maybe 26%, which is the NOS requirement, but it's up to you. Relative to height in this zone district, well, the NOS zone district allows no more than 2.5 stories, and the PRD 55 feet and 4 stories. But of course, that is something that can be modified. And so we're looking at between 4 and 5 stories, and depending on where you are, the height ranges between 52 and 59. So kind of in that 55-foot range. Materials are brick and fiber cement panel. The building has been appropriately designed relative to pedestrian entrances. We've got that at the corner. And transparency, lots of transparency. We have transparency for that commercial use, almost all windows, and then the residential portion has a significant amount of transparency. I would think that the discussion about transparency might really focus on the portion of the parking structure that is visible, okay? And that might also be part of the facade variation portion of the zoning ordinance. The applicant could probably talk about this in a greater detail, but you can see that on these, renderings, that there is some detail that continues into the concrete of the parking deck to provide some relief. So that pattern is supposed to provide some visual interest and break up that expansive wall. Additionally, you can see that on the 3 sides facing the street, a significant amount of landscaping is proposed. I do want to mention on this Lafayette side that the rendering shows, along with the columnar evergreens. The narrative as well as this rendering shows green screens. That is not reflected on the landscape plan, so I would ask that the applicant talk about what is intended there. And so the Planning Commission should determine if the proposed design and landscaping treatment adequately addresses the lack of facade variation. Relative to density, the NOS zone district does allow residential uses as a primary use. It doesn't have to be a mixed-use development. You could do a residential development in the NOS, and on this entire site, including the sun tidal portion, the site could support up to 155 dwelling units. 186 dwelling units are being proposed. So the Planning Commission should consider whether this density is appropriate. Some things that the Planning Commission may wish to consider are transit, the availability of transit in the vicinity, the fact that it is, the current zone district does allow a relatively high density. And you might also wish to consider that a significant number of the units are intended to be quite small. They're intended to be studios, and by our definition, they are micro units. So they're about 400 square feet. So I'd like to mention that in the other mixed-use commercial zone districts, such as the TCC, the TBA, or the C zone district, we actually don't even count micro units toward density, all right? So that the applicant is not asking for any kind of waiver along those lines, but I just want to mention that because I do think it is something that we allow in other locations. On to parking. So we have a interior parking structure that is proposed to have 78 spaces. Using either the PRD or the NOS parking requirements, which are higher than, say, our TBA or TCC parking requirements, 283 parking spaces are required. So it has a significant deficiency. The applicant is requesting that the parking be reduced based on available on-street parking, proximity to transit, and alternative vehicle parking. On Leonard, there are two bus lines that serve the site. So the site is well served by transit. There is on-street parking, but not all around. I'll go back to the aerial photo. Leonard and Lafayette do not have any on-street parking. Carrier does, however, I meant to take a screenshot and include it here, but on the portion of the site that's going to be developed, we've got green infrastructure there. There's a rain garden. So then that must have been done when the street was redone. And so it's not possible to have parking immediately north of the site. There are parking spaces adjacent to the sun tidal portion. Six alternative vehicle parking spaces are proposed within the garage, and that is a reduction. There's also a parking reduction allowed for micro units, where parking for micro units can be reduced by a half a space, as long as two enclosed bike parking spaces are provided per unit. So the applicant is not proposing, they're not calling them micro units to have any kind of waiver for density or parking, but again, I did want to mention this to you. That being said, the project won't meet the full bike parking requirement. They are proposing 56 bike spaces inside, and for a development of this number of units, they would need 103 bike parking spaces. So they're asking for a waiver of 47 bike parking spaces. So you might balance that with that micro unit density and parking issue. I don't have an answer for you, but it's something to think about. Relative to traffic impacts, the applicant did do a trip generation analysis. They worked with Mobile GR on that. And I did not include that in my staff report, but Mobile GR did review that analysis and agreed with the conclusions of the letter that trip generation for this project is anticipated to be minimal and does not warrant a traffic impact study. I believe we might have John Bartlett here from Mobile GR. Should you have any questions about traffic impacts? On to signage. The applicant requests that this retail component allow the uses that would be, be subject to the use table for the TN-TBA zone district. And it would be appropriate to also assign TN-TBA for signage. And staff is amenable to that. We feel that that would also be appropriate. It is a very small space. We might also recommend, and I did include this in the recommended conditions of approval, that office use be allowed by right. It would typically be a special land use in this location, but it does not seem inappropriate for office. If somebody in the building wanted to use that as office, that might be okay. So TBA for signage and uses at the corner. Did you have any questions for me on this portion of the site before I move over to the Sun Tidal portion? Okay. Let's see. So, let's see. Not sure what slide I should use here. I will use this one. So, as I mentioned, Sun Tidal, they're a title company. They own the site and intend to continue their office use on the site. They've got 58 parking spaces. You know what? I think I'll go back to this aerial photo. They have 58 parking spaces on site, and that's 29 fewer than what is required for the significant amount of floor area of the office use. And we granted Sun Tidal director review for deferred parking. Sun Tidal said, we don't need as many parking spaces as what you're requiring. Can we just build them if we need to? And so we did a parking deferral agreement, and Sun Tidal today is saying, we're never going to need these spaces, and we're asking you to formally waive the those additional 29 parking spaces. And I can have the applicant talk a little more about that if you have any questions. One thing that we might want to consider is just to confirm that the accessory use of the YMCA using the commercial kitchen will not have any conflict with parking demand there. Relative to this portion of the site, the applicant is requesting, and staff finds it appropriate, to establish the NOS zone district for both uses and signage. So we'd have sort of differences on the two halves of the site. We've received several letters in response to both the public hearing notice postcards that go out, as well as the neighborhood outreach that was conducted by the applicant. We've received several letters of support from residents. One of the letters did express some concerns about density and parking, and that letter is in your packet. We've received letters of support from the Creston Business Association and Neighborhood Association. The letter from Creston indicates that their support is based on commitments by the applicant that were made at a meeting with the Creston Neighborhood Association. These commitments include 10 affordable housing units, collaboration with the Rapid to construct sheltered bus stops near the development, and engagement in additional community outreach activities about the proposed construction activities when those would occur. I do want to mention that affordable housing is not part of the applicant's application and was not taken into consideration at all in staff's analysis. I will defer to the applicant to talk about that in further detail. So, in sum, we're looking at a primarily residential building with up to 186 dwelling units with between 4 and 5 stories. I will be happy to answer any questions or turn it over to the applicant, and I think they'll be able to better describe why they came up with this design and some of their approaches toward dealing with that grade change on the site.
Any questions for Elizabeth? I have one. If the space for commercial doesn't work out as commercial, would they be permitted to put in residential in that space?
Well, that's an excellent question. As proposed, we don't really, that would be an excellent thing to consider and maybe incorporate into the development or into the conditions of approval. You know, I don't know if we'd want to add one more dwelling unit. Right now we have, well, we noticed for 186.
I think right now, because of the way it's been noticed with the specific number of parking waivers as well as the number of units, any increase in residential density, and because it's a PRD, would likely necessitate it to come back before the city for that kind of modification.
Unless they stay within the 186 dwelling units.
But potentially, then it impacts the amount of required part. Oh, no, it wouldn't. I'm sorry. You're right. Mm-hmm. And I think it also depends on whether or not that commercial space is material to the decision of whether or not you feel that it meets the standards. If it's immaterial, then we have more flexibility.
I'm thinking, of course, of other developments who have come back to request that. So, thank you.
Shall I turn it over to the applicant then? Okay. Yep. So I'll take this, but you can advance and go back or use this. And I know where everything is on here, so I can, when you're talking, I can advance to what you need to.
I appreciate it. Thank you. All right, good afternoon. My name is Lawrence Duttler. I'm one of the co-owners of Sun Title. I'm here with my business partner, Tom, and the folks from Pinnacle who are partnering with us on this project. I thought it would be good just to kind of start from a little bit of the beginning of how we even acquired this entire site. Our journey into Creston started in 2003 when we purchased our first building right there in the core of Creston. It was just, at the time, we liked the neighborhood, and it was a perfect spot between his house and my house. So it was just kind of great, and we just fell in love with the district. We've been there for over 20 years, improving buildings and houses and things like that. So we love the neighborhood. We've got great relationships, as you can see from the letters of support, with the neighborhood association, the business association. But it's always been our vision to kind of turn this entire community into the gem that it has become right now. It's amazing as we look at some of the other developments that are going on right next to our Sun Title building. It's just been beautiful. It's been beautiful, and we're excited about what's happening in Creston. It's always been a great neighborhood, and we're starting to get the attention it deserves. So we were, it was in the middle of COVID, we were running out of space at our corporate headquarters. We had purchased a number of buildings on the corner of Spencer and Plainfield and just started running out of space. So I did a very scientific approach, knowing that we wanted to stay in Grand Rapids, stay in Creston, and I went to Google Maps and kind of zoomed out, and there was this big spot over right by us, and I zoomed in, and it turns out it was owned by Hope Network at the time, and it was for sale. It was part of their Pivot program where they were helping people come out of whether it was drug rehab or prison or something like that and kind of re-enter. So they were using it as a quasi-residential. There were some offices on the upper floor, but the building was built in 1960 and had gone through a number of iterations in how they were using it. So we ended up looking at the site, and it provided a couple of things for us. Number one, it certainly provided enough square footage for us, for our employees, but we love renovation projects and turning things into new uses. And this site in particular kind of excited us because we're trying to attract, as you can imagine, a younger workforce and bringing professionals into the area here. And we knew that we needed a corporate headquarters and an office that would provide something interesting and special. And so we toured it the first time, and we discovered the commercial kitchen that it had in there, and what are we going to do with the commercial kitchen? There was a big open break room, and then there was the gymnasium area that we discovered. So it's a full-size gym with basketball courts. We actually installed pickleball, which has been a lot of fun. But it's got some really interesting features to it. When we talk about parking and the variances that we had, there's the building itself is about 32,000 square feet, and just under half of that is common space. It's the gym, it's the huge break room, it's the commercial kitchen, it's the boiler room, things like that. But it really provided these really neat amenities that we saw twofold. One, it was an opportunity to sell something neat to employees to show them that that we could offer something a little bit different than a lot of other employers. But we've also found it's been a huge community impact. We've been using the gymnasium for just some wonderful events for some organizations that we support. Hand to Hand is one of them, where we have packing sessions come in. We work closely with them, and we'll pack 2,000 backpacks with food for kids and things like that. We've got there's a professional basketball team, a women's basketball team that needed a place to practice because they can't find space. So in exchange for using the space, they're doing community events with the neighborhood girls, doing mentoring and basketball clinics and things like that. So our view of the site and everything that we were looking for was very much employee focused and community focused. We were particularly interested in this vacant land next to it because one of the challenges that our employees have is finding housing, finding affordable housing and things like that. But we also wanted it to be a beautiful building, right? My office overlooks this building. So as we were looking for partners to design the program and what it was going to look like, that's where I thought Pinnacle just did a beautiful job of designing it, incorporating even just the colors of the brick from our building to their building. It's the grade of the property is certainly challenging from basically the first floor of our building to the corner of Leonard there is about 25 feet. So you got a pretty significant, it's basically 2 stories just to hit our floor. And then our Sun Title building is 2 stories. So the 4 stories, and then when you take St. Alphonsus into it, as we step back, and we were up at Belknap Park at one point, just kind of looking at how it all looked, you could see how the skyline would just kind of match pretty nice. The site's challenging, there's no doubt about it, but we're also excited about just how it's been designed. The parking underneath, I thought was really good. As far as the setbacks go, if you've ever walked around that property or driven around it, there's a large brick retaining wall that's about 12 inches from the sidewalk. And that entire thing is getting blown out. So this project, I think, really is going to make things far more open feeling, especially on that corner as you're coming around with Lafayette. There's a nice setback there too. So from an aesthetic standpoint and just even from a walkability, we really feel that it's been designed as a really beautiful building. There's a lot of dimension to it with the balconies and things like that. So it's and the green space too. We're doing the best we can to really hide that parking garage with the greenery and the like. Really, it's really just Lafayette that has the most view of the parking garage, and a lot of that can be masked with the landscaping and the like. As far as parking goes, when we moved into the building, we moved probably 35 people into the building. We just didn't need all the parking. We are now probably at Sun Title 80% capacity on the first floor is where we have all our offices. On the second floor, we ended up leasing that part out to a client of ours that's in construction with some subtenants that they've got going on. So the entire building right now is probably 80% full from a capacity standpoint, and we've got parking spaces available. We don't do a lot of, neither the tenants nor us have a lot of retail traffic. We have our commercial closing group there, so we have some clients coming in for closing, but you're talking 1 or 2 closings a day on the commercial side, so it doesn't require a lot of visitor parking, and frankly, it's never been a problem. We don't have anybody right now that's even considering parking on the street or anything like that. So from a parking perspective, it's a little weird because if you just look at the overall square footage of the building, it takes into account this enormous gym, our big break room. I mean, what you don't see here is there's a gigantic interior courtyard that we've got picnic tables and umbrellas and, just nice landscaping area for people to have lunch and the like. So what you're seeing here is the building outline from the outside, but you don't see even just the interior space there. So it's a unique building. It's a unique building itself. Also from a parking, when we start thinking about transportation, we were working quite a bit with Pinnacle just on the parking spaces and what that impacts, because we work there. We've got offices all around, and we work and live there, right? So it was interesting. I actually went onto the bus routes, and I'm like, okay, if we say we're on bus routes, what does it really mean, right? Well, you could take a bus from this building to Family Fair, right down the road. It's 9 minutes, 1 bus, no changes, right? Just a straight shot. You can take a one-shot approach. You can get to Van Andel Arena. It takes you 14 minutes, and it's 1 bus. There's no transfers. You can get to the Medical Mile. 9 minutes, 1 bus all the way down. So it's a beautifully located building. And as we were looking at the size of the apartments and the affordability of these things, that was a key component with our employees. Title insurance still, we hire a lot of folks that don't go to college and, they've got high school degrees. It's a great opportunity to have a professional office career, but still finding affordable housing is so challenging. So I think that was another really real breakthrough with how Pinnacle designed this with these slightly smaller units, and just the ability to reduce the cost of those units to residents, because our vision for it really is it's an opportunity for us to have our own employees have opportunities to stay here as well. And so between the folks that are working on the Medical Mile and all up and down Leonard and even up and down Plainfield, it's a compelling case for how you can design a site and design units that really can be affordable. Our community outreach is going to continue. Like I said, we've got great relationships with the neighborhood and with the business association, and I see no reason that's going to change. And we continue to find new ways to have our our facility used by other nonprofits. And it's been a great community outreach. We're calling it the Sun Title Community Center, and there's just a lot of opportunities for that. So our commitment again to the Creston area continues. We're excited about this site. Other than that, am I forgetting anything? We're super excited. We get pretty excited about this thing because it's really the culmination of 20-some years of trying to improve this district, and we've had great partners come in a number of areas just to continue to just make this a really great neighborhood. And you've got the park across the street, which is beautiful. I don't know what they're going to do with the school, but that's going to be I think that's going to be an interesting site. And of course our partners with St. Alphonsus. That's the only downside of the building is right now I get to see St. Alphonsus, but I won't be able to see it when it's done. But I'll be able to hear the bells, so that's still all good. Any questions for me?
Thank you. Yes, we have some questions.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there will be bike hooks or storage incorporated into the units themselves.
I don't think we're at that point in our design yet.
Okay. And then it looks from your renderings like you have thought about this, but I just wanted to verify and confirm that you're ensuring that the vegetation you're using to screen the parking garage will screen it all year long.
That's the goal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. I've asked for a few more evergreens because I also love Christmas lights, so.
And that's part of the discrepancy between,
This is James Lewis, by the way, with Pinnacle.
yeah. Hi, James Lewis with Pinnacle Construction. That's part of the discrepancy on the Lafayette side, where we have both the arborvitaes and the green screen. So we wanted some pine in there, as well as a vine that might lose leaves over the winter. And there's maybe a little bit of lack of coordination on the drawings between the vision and our landscape architect.
I appreciate the discussion about the transit lines. How did you come up with how many parking spaces you should actually provide for your facility?
Well, a little bit of it is what's physically possible at the site, and we kind of backed into the amount that shows up in the footprint of it underground. But that also went into our thinking of how we skew the mix, I would say. So instead of being maybe a little more heavy on the one bedroom to studio, we went more studio to one bedroom, kind of depressing that need for parking more than might otherwise be required on the site, I'd say. We looked at other ideas of bringing surface parking into the courtyard, but then you lose a lot of green space and it's not nearly as nice of an amenity. And we really don't think that the market is demanding the parking at even close to a 1-to-1 or half of. We think it's less than a half of a space to unit ratio for this type of unit. It's on the 2 bus lines, which is really excellent. It's got the bike lanes are right in front of it. You can walk down to the dash as well. There really isn't many better sites in town from a alternate transportation standpoint.
And if you're wrong, where will people park?
Well, when it was not an official study, but we went around and counted just the spaces a block in any direction, and we counted at least another 50 on-street parking spaces that are available within a reasonable walk of the entrances to the property. Yeah.
There's also that you're talking about at St. Alphonsus.
Yeah, so I'm also, St. Alphonsus is right across the street. They've got plans for what they're doing with their center there. They've got parking. I know that they are also struggling with some parking even on Sundays and things like that. So there might even be some cross opportunities there to work arrangements with them if necessary.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I had a couple for you. Regarding the green screens, facing west. How confident are you that those are possible?
In terms of, when you say, like how, like as far as their ability to be maintained and vibrancy and that
Yes.
kind of thing, I think there's between, right now, we've got the sidewalk right up against a brick wall. Now we've got quite a bit of space now from the sidewalk to that entrance area. So I think the short answer is, our plan is to use Michigan foliage, that kind of thing, to make sure it's hardy enough to sustain throughout the winters. We want it to look nice.
Sure.
One of the things, when we were staying in Creston, I get off at the Leonard Street exit and have been for about 20 years off 131. So I didn't want to have to change the exit because I think I'd miss my exit all the time. So we live in this area. We drive this area. We want it to look nice, and we take a lot of pride in the work that we do. I mean, if you were to walk through our facility, changing the St. John's home into our corporate headquarters, it's better space than we deserve. It's beautiful.
I think we share the same goals. My experience with green walls, green screens make me question whether that's viable.
Yeah.
And so mostly I'm just wondering, if it's not viable, are you willing to supplement with additional landscaping that can be, replanted at a future date should the green screen not be viable?
I would think we would have every intent to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I agree. It's sometimes the vines that grow up and things like that. We've experienced that whereas we want it to look nice.
Yep. Okay. My second question is, I want to make sure that we go through the grades a little bit in detail, and particularly along the carrier side.
Mm-hmm.
So in looking at the street grades, it looks like we're ranging from about 700 elevation to 703. And then your finished floor is at 709. So that's about 6 to 9 feet, give or take, above the street. But I couldn't tell what the sidewalk grades are in, but give or take, it's about that, right?
Yeah, I think one way to kind of look at it to get a little bit of a visual as to where that deck sits in relation to carrier is if you follow that wall along from our building that goes along to that first corner there, that's about the same grade level as the deck there.
Yeah.
And it's the parking garage that's below that. Yeah.
Yep, understood. So again, give or take, you're about 6 to 9 feet above sidewalk grade. You're mitigating that elevation change through landscaping, which I think is good. In light of the fact that you've got 2-story homes across the street, and this is a pretty tall 4-story, was there ever consideration to doing a step back, losing what looks to be 8 units on that 4th floor, only on that elevation, to try to maybe better transition into the neighborhood? Was that ever considered? And if it couldn't work, can you help me understand why?
Yeah, James could probably speak to it a little bit. I know when we were talking about the parking area, what's below that floor line is obviously the underground parking. So it would be not just pushing units back, but it would be pushing parking back as well, I think. Is that what you're describing?
Nope. I understand why the finished floor of the first usable floor is about 9 feet, because you've got the parking deck. But then you've got 4 floors of apartments on top. And I'm just curious about whether that 4th floor of residential units on Carrier is, I'm going to say necessary, only in the fact that taking out the 8 units-ish might be a better scale.
Yeah, I can speak to that, and I think it goes, let's even take a step back there, and, one thing that hasn't been brought up much at all in this meeting is, we also did a geotechnical study of the site and found there's less dense than we would want for regular spread footing soil along much of the perimeter of where we wanted to put the building, and so that kind of started the story of, how do we develop the site in a way that maximizes it, but also is as cost-effective per unit as possible, right? And so that unsuitable soil conversation led us, and as well as all the grade change, really led us into the underground parking scenario where you aren't seeing residential buildings with underground parking very much, and certainly not in this area, right? So this is a significant expense for the project in order to get any sort of residential project here to work. And so sharing the load, I would say, of the parking garage on a per unit basis is an important consideration for getting this project developed. And one thing we also haven't talked about at all is, our next step in this whole process is the incentives to the Economic Development Department. So we are applying for neighborhood enterprise zone tax abatement, and that is predicated on the very small retail portion of the building. That's still state legislation that needs to be there. We do have a plan in terms of what happens if that does not work out, and it really just becomes more building amenity space. We're talking about maybe a shared co-working space for the building or something along those lines, or maybe it's just an internal coffee shop for residents and the user's fund title. But that's what's pushing that decision that way. Unfortunately, it's a little bit of tail wagging the dog, but it is what it is, and it's an important resource for the project. And then the other part will be a significant brownfield TIF on the project. So both for the underground parking, the unsuitable soils, but we will also be pursuing the new housing brownfield as well. And that housing brownfield is what will, provide the compliance mechanism for the affordable units in there. And in that housing brownfield, if it gets passed, right, it's not up to us whether it makes it through or not. But if it does get passed, then we'd be at a 20% ratio of units that are within the affordability range there, as defined by the new brownfield housing program. So it'd be, instead of 10, it'd be 37 units.
Did that answer your question?
On the step back.
It did.
Yeah,
I just think it's important that, the community and the planning commission see the grade change, and that's always tricky, and I feel like it's my job to point it out. But then also, I think it's important that, a step back from a scale and massing perspective, I think makes sense. However, I think that, the soil suitability and the real world life of development performance is also something that has to be considered. But I just think it's important that we're transparent about those reasons. So that's why I asked the question.
Appreciate the question.
Just because I have done this to other people, I want to be sure. Can you please clarify which parking level plan is correct, whether it's C1 or A01? C1 has a significantly larger bike parking area, which consequently shows less bike parking spaces than the smaller bike parking area. But I'm just curious which one we're approving, or which one we're looking at for this approval.
I guess I missed the coordination on that one. Can you show me?
C1
Can you show
has
me
a
C1?
different plan layout. I'm assuming that A01 is correct.
Yeah, no, it's A1 is the correct one, and it's a different different bike storage system in there, where the A1 is looking at a two-tier system, and the C1 was looking at all wall-mounted hooks.
Okay. Do you know what that system is? Because if I can fit 10 bikes in a 5-foot by 6-foot space, I would be a very happy person.
Yeah, it's a Sarah system. I can send you the link.
Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. We'll open up the public hearing for anyone who would like to speak on this case. Make your way up to the microphone at this time. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and turn to discussion.
Okay, all right. I guess I'll kick things off. I'm excited about this project. I think it's appropriate in this location. I think the parking waivers are appropriate based on all the transportation options that have been discussed. I've been driving past this property a lot, going to and from city where my oldest stepdaughter is doing the musical, and so lots of evening practice times that I've been going there lately, and so every time I like something should be here, and then this showed up on our agenda, so I was pretty excited about it. I do appreciate the discussion about scale and the surrounding neighborhood. But I think they've done a good job with the facade variation and all the landscaping, and so yeah, I'm supportive of the project.
As I was listening, thinking about all the discussions we've had about housing, and good discussions, the need for housing, number one, need for affordable housing, using transit instead of that. I really appreciate the fact that the parking's underneath. You rarely in a neighborhood area see it underneath. I know it's much more expensive, but sacrificing or advocating for more green space rather than asphalt, I think will be just another way. And I like having the micro size. I think that as we are the more I study and learn about housing patterns and where we're going in the future and where young people are going, the idea of 500 or 400 and 600 affordable housing is better than mom and dad's basement, and is that way to start, attracting young people and giving them opportunities they don't seem to have right now a lot in housing. So I think about all the things we talk about at everyone about them, and I think this hits the mark on so many of them. And hopefully people will be able to walk to work.
So I have no problem with the use. I have no problem with the density. I'm disappointed at how it reacts to the street and the fact that there's a giant concrete wall. I have no faith that anything's going to grow on the proposed system. I understand landscaping in front of it, but I can think of a lot of examples in town that didn't work. I can't think of any that did. So outside of like Hortex live wall system, which is actually just planter boxes that are irrigated, and it's a whole different idea. But that's not what's being proposed. So I'm concerned about what that would be like to walk past in general. I don't, I don't know that it needs to change our decision, but I guess that's my main concern. I'm not concerned about the size or scale of the building in general otherwise.
So are you sort of alluding to the similar concern that I had, and perhaps we could, well, depending on how others feel, but maybe reevaluate the landscaping to not rely on a wall system? Is that where you're going?
I think that would be probably more appropriate, but again, when is the landscaping going to be the significant portion of that experience? Are we planting things that are this tall and 20 years from now it's planted like it is in the renderings, or is it like, so my main concern is we are talking about a significant parking reduction, which I'm perfectly fine with, but if we're talking about that, we're talking about people walking in front of this building all the time. So I think it needs to be an appropriate space for people to walk, and I think it needs to be comfortable for people to walk by, especially if we're saying most of these tenants aren't going to be driving.
So this is a PRD, and you have the flexibility to put conditions and expectations on a project that you may not otherwise have under a traditional site plan review, for example. So I'll verify, but I'm pretty sure the ordinance would require that plants be 24 inches at the time of planting, and there is a time period for how long the landscaping is monitored by the city. I want to say it's a year from time of the site being complete and stable. But if there is a need to ask for more mature landscaping to be planted initially, that's something that the Planning Commission has the ability to do because it's directly related to the pedestrian experience and material to your decision as to whether or not this is an appropriate scale design.
I often walk, where the restaurant Lanier is on North Monroe, and I walk along the river there, and then I do my loop to go back to where I live, and they have a parking lot that is the first level, and then there's the restaurant Lanier, and it has a screening, and it has just landscaping at level, not columns up and down. And I find the openness of it to not be, this is on the river, which is a beautiful walk, and then down Monroe. I don't find it to be that distracting as where, when I walk by some parking ramps where it's just concrete, as it used to be where, on the corner of Fulton and Division, I remember that. It was just concrete you walked by. So I don't like the idea of walking by concrete, but maybe, I don't think it takes away from the whole, to have ground floor parking and then have some kind of a screening there. It's not like walking by a concrete wall. To me, it is, it's the rest of the plan makes up for, and with all of the landscaping and outdoor green space. So it's not as much a concern to me, maybe others.
Yeah, are there any other opinions other than mine and maybe a little bit of Kristen's?
I share the concern as well. I don't know, I think it's almost better if it's possible to open up the parking slightly so, and I don't know structurally if this is even possible, but you see some parking decks that they're open air to the exterior, and there's some screening metal or something that prevents people from just passing through the opening, but at least it does give this ability to see through, and it feels a bit more comfortable. It gives the impression of transparency, even if it's into a parking lot. But that feels better. And I'm thinking of there's a parking ramp in downtown Grand Haven that's like that, where it doesn't feel just like a concrete wall, but it feels more scaled for a pedestrian, I suppose.
Yeah, I think asking Mr. Lewis for some thoughts on that, I'm thinking Alabama does have windows-ish into the parking deck. You've pointed to one in Grand Haven, so there are ways to have openings into the deck. So I guess it might be interesting to hear from James if that's possible here to break up, I think, the massing of that wall, but then also use landscaping to supplement.
Yeah, it's certainly physically possible. It makes it harder to condition the garage where we have, the majority of it's underground, so we can keep it at temperature a lot easier if it's not open at all, and kind of shoots that idea as soon as we start opening it up. I will say that we're doing both arborvitaes, which will grow tall, as well as wall screening, right? So it's like trying to double landscaping along that side just in case. But yeah, if that's what you wanna see, it's certainly a doable thing. Might not be our preference, and that's why we didn't go that way initially. But we definitely talked about the pros and the cons of both ways.
including windowed openings?
More like a screened opening. I mean, it could be glass in there. Yeah, we didn't talk much about that version of it, but.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate the attention to this detail, and we know that Sun Title has an excellent track record in property management and development. We also have to plan for other owners who might eventually own the place, so. Any other thoughts on the pedestrian experience? Any thoughts on the appropriateness of the density in this location?
I'm not concerned with that at all.
Yeah, no concern.
I mean, I guess just to reiterate, this is a main street with access to good transit, and I think, yeah, completely appropriate for this level of density. Have we come to any, so what do we want to do about, like, if we're going to craft a condition related to the pedestrian experience, I guess, I would like someone else to do it, but also kind of come to an agreement about what that is. It's just working with staff to make sure it's good.
So our majority, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
I was just going to ask if we could just trust staff to help figure it out. It sounds like you have similar concerns, so I mean,
Yeah.
I think that a staff level review of it or coordination with staff makes sense to me. But
So head nods, it sounds like majority of commissioners share the concern of Commissioner Swamin raised by me, so some mitigating measures, whether that's, maybe it's a both architectural treatment to break up the facade, whether that's openings or some sort of treatment to break up the foundation wall, and look at landscaping options, which would include maybe more mature landscaping at the time of planting, so they're not like teeny tiny shrubs that will take a couple of years to mature before we get to the beautiful rendering that's before us. Is that head nods, yes? Yes. Okay, I can work on that.
And I appreciate the question that Kristen raised to the applicant about stepping back from the residential neighborhood up at the top of the building. I did find the applicant's explanation compelling. Just wondered what others thought.
I think that, balancing cost, density, affordability, parking underground versus in asphalt, and you have to put the package together, and I think that this is a significant amount of new housing for us that'll be affordable and meet a market demand. So when I put that package together, this seems to hit almost all the points that we talk about a lot when we're talking about housing.
Just one point, and I don't know if this is happening just by happenstance, but I believe we talked a little bit about the affordable housing piece. This application has no affordable housing.
Right, it's not part of this.
It's not a part of this application. So
They have, I just want to clarify, they have committed to the neighborhood that they would include some affordable units within the development. It is not within the Planning Commission's purview to require that.
Right.
Because of laws in place that would preclude us from doing so. We would probably generally support that ongoing conversation. The economic development incentive tools, if those move forward, would likely be the tool where the city has more ability to require that. So you are correct. From your purpose, your decision does not include the inclusion of affordable units.
yeah, well, yes, I get that. Where I'm more so going is saying that this is affordable housing, when there is no requirement that this be affordable housing. The application does not include affordable housing. So not to be picky with the words, but I don't want to use the term affordable housing when this could very well be penthouse suites for folks. So I appreciate that that's not the intent, obviously, but I don't want to be putting words in their mouths or up on the application thinking that this is affordable housing when it is not, as of yet.
You're correct. The term affordable is very loosely defined depending on who you ask. I think in most sense, we would look to how community development defines affordable housing, which is an area median income adjusted for family size. They are more affordable units because they are micro units at a market rate. But you're right, that's not as the city would define affordable housing.
Got you. Okay. Thank you.
One of the things we were asked to consider was creating minimums for green space and tree canopy. One of the draft conditions says 25% green, at least 25% green space and 26% tree canopy. I was wondering what other commissioners thought of that. Great. Then I'm willing to.
Before you make a motion, I just want to make a comment. No, I don't want to. I wanted you to
You want to
suggest that you were about to make a motion before I comment, just make a quick comment that we did receive a letter of opposition who mentioned little faith in anyone actually reading this and considering my comments. I want to just point out that
I also read.
we have read this
Yes.
and we have considered this. And I do think some of the comments made, especially in light of some of the recent discussions on affordable housing and housing in general, just housing availability, are a bit misguided. And so I just want to point that out.
Okay. Get to the beginning here. All right, now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Commission recommends approval for the request of CD Holdings, Lawrence Duttler, and Pinnacle Construction Group, Inc., James Lewis, to rezone 385 Leonard Street Northeast from NOS Neighborhood Office Service to a planned redevelopment district to facilitate the construction of a plus or minus 186-unit, 5-story apartment building with a commercial component and vehicular and bicycle parking reductions for the following reasons. The proposed use will meet the site plan review standards of Section 5.12.e because all elements of the site design are harmoniously and efficiently organized in relation to topography, the size and type of lot, character of the neighborhood and adjoining property. Natural features and site topography are incorporated into the proposed site design to the maximum extent practicable. The use, density of development and design of the proposed PRD are consistent with the master plan and purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance because the proposed development will increase the number and variety of housing units in the city, locate new higher density residential development to capitalize on transit and improve land use transitions, direct development and investment toward infill and reuse of previously developed sites, and allow reductions in required off-street parking in areas that are within easy walking distance of transit routes. The proposed PRD will ensure efficient development on the property and will result in a logical and orderly development pattern in the neighborhood because the building has been sited on the property to mitigate impact to the residences directly across Carrier while contributing to the urban street wall along Lafayette and Leonard. The proposed development will be compatible, harmonious, and appropriate with the existing or planned character and uses of the neighborhood, adjacent properties, and the natural environment because the proposed building design and high-quality materials meet the characteristics important in planned redevelopment districts. The project maintains the neighborhood's unique character, enhancing its walkable scale and reinforces its sense of place. Potentially adverse effects arising from the proposed development on the neighborhood and adjacent properties will be minimized through through an appropriately screened parking lot, including berms and landscaping, and attractive architecture and appropriate building orientation and entrances. The proposed development will not be detrimental, hazardous, or disturbing to existing or future adjacent uses or to the public welfare by reason of excessive traffic or noise or visual clutter because vehicle access to the parking level is located on Lafayette, which will mitigate impacts to nearby residences and safety impacts to the intersection of Lafayette and Leonard. The trip generation analysis indicates that the development will have minimal impact on existing traffic operations and along adjacent roadways. Excessive noise is not anticipated from this residential use. Signage will be limited. And connections for pedestrians and vehicles are provided to and within the site. The proposed development will retain as many natural features of the landscape as practicable because the proposed development will respect the grades on and near the site and adequate green space and stormwater detention will be provided. Adequate public or private infrastructure and services already exist or will be provided at no additional public cost and will safeguard the health, safety, and general welfare of the public because the subject property is located in close proximity to public transit and major streets and is currently served with public utilities, and the applicant will be responsible for the construction of any infrastructure improvements necessary to support the development. The proposed development will not be detrimental to the financial stability and economic welfare of the city because the proposed development will help mitigate the existing housing shortage and may encourage future development in the area. The scale and design of the proposed development does not place an excessive burden on services currently furnished or may be required by the city. Wherever practicable, the proposed development will provide amenities, including but not limited to park and recreational facilities, urban open space, and non-vehicular connections that serve a public purpose because the development will maintain significant green space for the visual relief of nearby residents. Be it further resolved that the following conditions approval shall apply to this project. Standard condition set A, approvals, striking 3 and 7, which I'll read. 1, that the application and plan submitted by the applicant and signed, dated, and stamped by the planning director shall constitute the approved plans, except if plan elements do not meet ordinance requirements and are as amended in this resolution. That the use shall operate according to the application and per testimony as recorded in the Planning Commission minutes. That a land use development services, LUDS permit, building permit, and all other required permits be obtained from the city of Grand Rapids prior to construction, demolition, or operation. Striking 5 too, I guess. That the proposed use will comply with all other applicable city ordinances and policies and all state laws. 2, that the new westerly building shall be governed by the rules and requirements for the TNTBA zone district for the purposes of signs and uses in the ground floor commercial space, except that office is a permitted use. That the existing Sun Title office building shall be governed by the rules and requirements for the NOS zone district for the purposes of signs and uses. That the site shall maintain at least 25% green space and a 26% tree canopy. That this approval shall take effect as required by the City Commission approval in the ordinance accordance with Section 5.12.12.g of the zoning ordinance. And do I have a draft condition for? Yes. Thank you.
That the building elevations be modified to provide openings and/or architectural variation within the foundation wall, screening the below-grade parking deck, and be subject to review and approval by the planning director.
Sure. And then I'd like to,
Ryan?
and then I'd like to amend condition 2 to say, except that office and residential are permitted uses.
For that ground floor unit?
For that ground floor, yes. Sorry. The ground floor commercial space, except that office and residential are permitted uses.
Okay. I had another condition, if you're open to that.
Sure.
That the landscape plan be modified to eliminate the proposed green screen and/or supplemented with additional plantings. Further, the proposed landscaping adjacent the building be modified to ensure mature vegetation at time of plantings.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, I'll support.
We have a motion and support. Any further discussion?
Sorry, that last, could you read that again?
Yes. That the landscape plan be modified to eliminate the proposed green screen and/or supplemented with additional plantings. Further, the proposed landscaping adjacent the building be modified to ensure mature vegetation at time of plantings.
So the choice is to eliminate or to increase?
To eliminate the green screen, and if they eliminate it, if they want to keep it, then they would supplement with additional landscaping in the vines, yeah. That they can keep it, but if they keep it, they need to supplement the plan.
And if they want to get rid of it,
If they want to get rid of it, then they need to supplement
Yeah, so and/or.
Okay.
and/or. Trying to give them flexibility to say, you know what, let's move away from the green screen. We're okay with that as long as they add additional plantings.
got you, okay.
Then if the green screen isn't viable, there's a mechanism for us to say, and we need more plantings.
Got you, okay.
If I haven't worded that correctly, that's okay. Like, tell me.
No, I thought that was helpful. Like, from what I heard, it was like, okay, well, we can choose to get rid of it or we can increase it. And I'm like, why wouldn't I just choose to get rid of it and just be done with it?
Yeah,
So,
that would be up to them. Trying to give them a little bit of flexibility to determine the best landscape plan, understanding that sounds like we're aligned with our goals, but that the screening, however they choose to accomplish that, whether it's through landscaping or vines, needs to be done.
okay, that makes sense. Got you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to take a 5-minute break. has departed, and let's resume.
The next item on the agenda is a request from Meyer for a new development at the corner of Kalamazoo and 28th Street at 1700 28th Street and a few other addresses. We did notice for a public hearing today, but the applicant did want to make some changes to their plans and has asked that the matter be postponed to June 13th.
2024.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
I'm happy to make a motion to,
Public.
oh, the public hearing, sorry.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I was going to say the same.
Okay. Because it was noticed, we will open the public hearing for anyone who would like to comment on the case, and we will put that in the minutes for consideration when we do deliberate on the case. So is there anyone here who would like to comment on 1700 28th Street? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and look for a motion.
Okay, sorry. I will make a motion to postpone this case to the June 13th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting.
Support.
We have a motion and 2 supports. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The motion passes.
The next item on the agenda is a continuation of a matter that was originally discussed by the Planning Commission on April 25th, 2024. This is 1639 Madison Avenue Southeast. A conditional rezoning is requested to rezone a portion of the subject property from TNLDR and TNTBA to SDIT Industrial Transportation. And as you will recall, the Planning Commission did discuss the matter and asked that a number of items be addressed. So I will not go over everything. I'm just going to go over what the Planning Commission requested, and I will also defer to the applicant to further explain some of those elements. The Planning Commission asked that the plans graphically reflect the offer and the conditional rezoning agreement align with that. The applicant has done that. That the number of parking spaces be limited to no more parking than what is permitted, with additional parking deferred until which time it is found to be warranted. That element will require a bit more discussion on my part and the applicant's. That the Montgomery Street streetscape be brought up to city standards, and the applicant is amenable to that. That the architectural elevations include a masonry base, and the applicant has updated their plans to include that, which you can see on this rendering and on this one, and it's also on the architectural plans. That the primary entrance to the building not be impeded by gated access. That has been addressed, and the applicant can further elaborate on that. That the potential for a landscape strip and street trees in the Madison Avenue Parkway be explored. I'll talk about that. Additionally, the applicant has removed any you may recall that there was building signage on the side of the building, and the applicant has removed that, and they'll just go with TNTBA signage. They have added that bike racks and a pedestrian access gate at the main entry along Madison to support multiple means of employee transit to the building. And the agreement has been revised to identify that the landscape and site lighting plans will comply with all zoning requirements. One, with all the changes to the agreement, we missed one thing. This landscape strip, reference to this landscape area, this landscape buffer, that was not included in the agreement, but that wasn't intentional, and the applicant will make that revision before it goes to City Commission. A couple of things that I do want the applicant to talk about is that operation of the vehicular and pedestrian access to the site via the gated entry, the need for the parking as proposed, and the need for the side building entrance. I will talk a little bit about the parking, and the Planning Commission really didn't want to see parking in excess of what was allowed. That would be 120% of the requirement. Staff met with the applicant's team, and in talking about how they actually intend to be using this building, we realized that their training area, that we included that in the office, and that it sounds like that's going to be much more intensively used than we had anticipated, basing it on just the office use. So we recalculated that, so that raised the number of parking spaces that would be required. The applicant also has indicated, and I think touched upon this a little bit at the last meeting, but we really talked about it in greater detail in our meeting, that they, because of the shift changes, they really do need to accommodate additional on-site parking, and they could talk a little bit about how their other facilities are used and the parking demands there. So I'll let them talk about that. The last thing that I want to mention is the Madison Avenue right-of-way treatment. And you might recall that the Planning Commission really wanted to see a more typical parkway treatment with a landscape strip and then the sidewalk and then the building, rather than having the sidewalk adjacent to the curb. So in the Vital Streets plan, in this area, a 6-foot sidewalk and an 8-foot parkway with a 6-foot wide landscape strip is actually recommended. So really, we do want what the Planning Commission was discussing. The problem is the width of the right-of-way in this area. And that is why at the adjacent building at 1601, they ended up with the same landscape treatment or streetscape treatment as what's being proposed here, okay? With the sidewalk adjacent to the curb. Now, the applicant is amenable to adding trees on their private property to provide what would be viewed as street trees. And they have done some, exercises to ensure that it would be possible, and it is. And they're, based on my discussions, I believe that they are amenable to adding trees on their private property for to act as street trees between the sidewalk and their building. So with that, do you have any questions for me? Okay, well then I will turn it over to the applicant, and
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Hi, Scott Ryan, Vice President General Counsel from Gentex. Nice to see everyone again. When we were here on April 25th, 2024, it was our understanding that there was general support for this, but there was also some confusion with some of the materials that we provided. So admittedly, there's a lot of construction issues on this site plan, some of which we haven't quite figured out all the way. And part of this process too is we wanted to get through the CRA to see, do we even have a project before we dove into that. But we understand why that causes some confusion when all the details aren't there. And we apologize for any misunderstandings or confusion we caused with some of the documentation last time. It was not with bad intent. And so we appreciate the opportunity to come back and talk again today. Also, thanks to Ms. Turtleson, Ms. Zeller, and Mr. Kent, and all the city staff talking to us throughout this process, particularly since the April 25th meeting. I think we've been able to have some good conversations and work through things. And so it's our understanding that the commissioners only wanted an update today. So as Ms. Zeller said, not planning on going through everything. Josh from Rockford is here again, so if we want to get into more technical conversations, he can jump in too. Otherwise, I'm going to try to be brief, but comprehensive and not redundant of Ms. Zeller. But there are roughly 7 quick highlights that I want to point out, and 2 changes to the CRA that we'll highlight as we step through this. So the first one being the south door entrance and the Madison Avenue pedestrian experience. So there was a lot of discussion last time about that door, the main entrance being on the south side of the building with the parking. And again, from our experiences of managing a lot of facilities that do this type of work, we do believe that's the right place for this door with the parking lot, and how we know employees are going to come in and out of the facility, and how we can use that shared entrance for not only employees but also visitors as well. And so we didn't want to have congregation or a lot of employees crowded up on the sidewalk as we go through a badge access process. And so that was our thought behind that. But we did, since the last discussion, add into the renderings and the drawings the walk-in gate for pedestrians. So that is in line with hoping for more non-vehicular commuting and walking and pedestrians and visitors. So so employees would be able to badge access through that outdoor gate to get into the facility, similar like a car would, but obviously in its own designated space so it's safe. And that would also be an opportunity for visitors there to communicate with someone inside that could give them access to the property, so that they could come inside. On the streetscape, Ms. Zeller did, talk about that a little bit. I'll just reiterate on the trees. From what we've looked at now, we think it'll be approximately 7 trees that we can get along that Madison Avenue corridor there. And then our drawings were updated from the Madison Avenue side to show the 24-inch CMU bump wall under the side paneling. Item 2 was the parking spaces. And so you see in our information, we did break down how we got to the calculation. Again, thanks for city staff and all the discussion that we had on this, and really helping us understand and work through the definitions of some of the things we were looking at from that training area. To get into the details a little bit, we thought the right calculation was the assembly calculation. Before, we were using education. And when we talked through those definitions, it was really education for how this body uses that word wasn't really the right way to go about that calculation. So we did get to the 95 spots. We did appreciate, Ms. Joseph, your recommendation on deferred parking. We're hesitant to do that right now just based on our experiences. Our other facilities, we have tried to promote other ways of commuting to work and not just driving your own car. We've worked with bus passes. We've promoted carpooling. Unfortunately, we just haven't had a ton of success. And so that's why we're hesitant to reduce that number of parking right now, just based on our experiences. But again, if you look at one of the things we like about this project is its location within the city. And so we do plan to work and use a lot of those same initiatives, even though we haven't been successful at other facilities, to use those initiatives with working with the city to promote bus passes, promote carpooling. Obviously, we've talked a lot about walking with being next to the residential area, e-mobility. We talked about bike racks. So it is in the plans. We do want to promote it. We can intend to promote it. Again, just based on our experiences, trying to reduce that number of parking spots right now. We're hesitant to do, and we think, with the calculation, we got to the right number of 95. Although not on today's docket, but it was kind of referenced before, all the gray space in the drawing are later phases of this project. And so you do have a commitment that when we go to look at building out those spaces, we will have better data on how this segment of our workforce and these employees come to work. And at that point, if we find some of these initiatives are successful, we will work to try to reduce the number of parking spots to be in line with those initiatives. The grading, item 3 was some of the grading. So we have revised our plans on the Madison Avenue frontage. There is, again, the finished build will comply with LUDs. We'll continue to work through that. We do still show the patio. We think there are still some grading challenges here, but we'll be sure to work through all that with the patio and the streetscape. Item 4 was the fencing. We did spend a lot of time talking about that last time as well. On the south boundary, that'll be the new fence, epoxy covered, 6 feet tall. The Madison Avenue, you see, it's on the previous rendering, it will be the decorative fence with the walk-up gate. And then on the west of the initial phase, that's where we're going to look to repair the fences, and particularly that one gate that we showed last time that was in needed repair. Item 5 being the landscape buffers. We clarified this with staff, revised plans, and we'll meet all the zoning ordinances on that as well. We do have an update to the CRA that will go in the draft to the city attorney that will identify on that west side of the initial phase, of how to break down that 25-foot buffer in some areas, and another part it'll be 15 feet, but that's shown in the drawings that were submitted. And then on the Montgomery interface, again, we'll construct that to meet all the city standards. We think that there's more opportunity there than just cleaning it up, but we think that's going to take a lot of work with city staff and engineering. And so we do want to go through those conversations to see if we can go above and beyond. But right now, again, the commitment is we'll make sure that meets city standards with this part of the project. Signage, again, we discussed with city staff, we'll meet the zoning ordinance for TNDBA. And the lighting, on the south side particularly, again, we want to be sensitive to the residents down there, and so we'll meet all the zoning ordinances and requirements. And that's also one of the changes that was made in the CRA draft to make sure we specify, that on the southern portion. So with that, I'll close it out. If I could just take, another minute of the time, just a few comments about Gentex, because last time our true intentions were kind of questioned, and we just want to make sure that you know who we are, as Gentex. We've been a part of West Michigan for 50 years. We believe in West Michigan, and we believe in the West Michigan workforce. And we don't just say this, we live it. We're the largest employer in Ottawa County. Last year we made over 50 million mirrors. That's over 60 million circuit boards that we've made. That's billions and billions of circuit board components that we've populated, all right here in West Michigan. 65% of that left North America. So that's a lot of product that we made here that a lot of other companies would have made in other parts, not just the country, but other parts of the world. But we bring those jobs right here. And that's what we believe is practicing what we preach. We currently have 37 employees working at our Cottage Grove manufacturing facility and another 36 employees working at our 25 Ottawa R&D Center. Not only do we bring great jobs to the area, we also believe we're among the top tier West Michigan companies that support the community in other ways besides just jobs. So again, I ask you to look at our record and our reputation. We respect this process, and we want to continue to work with this commission and the city and its staff, along with the residents, to make this project a success. But yes, it is our true intentions to bring bring great jobs with competitive compensation, benefits, in a clean manufacturing facility, and be part of a great revitalization project and continue to expand our efforts to take down barriers to employment such as transportation. So thank you for your time and consideration, and I assure you if we complete this CRA process, we'll continue to work with city staff and city engineering to ensure that all codes and ordinances are met. Thank you.
Thank you, and we appreciate the attention to the details based on the last meeting and also to your commitment to the city. And it's pretty easy to see how easy it is to go out to a greenfield and build something with the parking and the entrance wherever you want it. And we appreciate your commitment here.
Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant at this time? All right, then we'll turn to discussion.
Yeah, I guess I'll just start with the parking since that was my contribution to last meeting. Yeah, I'm comfortable with their justification for the amount of parking based on kind of the heavier use of the training space and the shift change considerations, and also appreciate the continued promotion of alternative modes and in their intent to do that too. I would love it if they added street trees along the Madison frontage. I think that would be great. And I also appreciate adding direct pedestrian access from the sidewalk as well to the building. And I understand based on kind of the items you're manufacturing, the security needs based on the contracts and requirements that you have with that. So yeah, thanks for the work to update the plan for us.
It may be worth noting the building to the north, although it wasn't before the Planning Commission, similar conversations were had relative to the entrance for, I think it's 1601 Madison, and we did not require an entrance on the front elevation. We agreed a side elevation entrance was appropriate, so this would be consistent with a decision if the Planning Commission would be comfortable with that as well.
I just want to say I appreciate the honesty today. It's a lot different than last time. We're not talking about grade issues. We're talking about the entrance being where it is because that's where it needs to be, or that's where you want it. Which is the conversation I wanted to have the first time. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the clarity that we have this time, and not having to pick and choose which plan information is coming from. And I appreciate the amount of effort that's gone in the last couple weeks to get here. So, and again, I think if street trees are available, I think it's appropriate. This really isn't for the applicant. I don't really understand the engineering excuse for the choices to pave here. From a design standpoint, when you go down the street, everything that we talked about in our last meeting exists. There's just less concrete. So I'm not sure I understand that nuance, but I feel like I've been overridden by engineering, so I'm not going to go any further. But I do think that there's a great opportunity here to be designing for the future, and I think that we're there. But this is a great opportunity to help connect the neighborhoods to the business district that's on the other, that's closer to Hall. And so I just don't want to overlook that as we consider these projects and this project's contribution to the neighborhood, which I do appreciate.
I think that there will be opportunities in the future when this portion of Madison is reconstructed that there will be opportunities for us to, when we have, when we either move curb lines or reevaluate the use of that space. So I don't think it's a lost war, if you will, with engineering as much as just making sure that we implement when it's reasonable and feasible, and we think a little bit more holistically. So I support your desire to have street trees adjacent the curb, and we will continue as a planning department to encourage that when possible.
Mr. Hooker, are you all set? Okay. Any further discussion, or do we have a motion?
Yeah, I just want to note, we did have a very lengthy and productive meeting I think it was last Monday, with the team. And I think, the CRAs are inherently challenging, and there's a lot of unknowns. And so I don't know that I would think of it as a lack of honesty as much as just maybe not being clear about some of the engineering and the details in the development of the plan. And perhaps in hindsight, those plans were not as developed as they should have been to be able to provide complete answers to the questions that the Planning Commission raised. So I guess after having met with them last Monday and going through a lot of the detail and understanding where they were at in the process at the time, I don't think that it's not my assessment that there was a intentional desire to be dishonest with the Planning Commission as much as the plans being developed.
And I'll apologize for my comment earlier about honesty. It probably came across differently than I intended, which unfortunately happens to me all the time. But I don't know if there's a clarification that I can give. I wasn't trying to accuse people. I was just trying to say that I appreciate discussing the issue at hand. And I think, yeah.
Well, thank you. I said, as you know, urban sites are just inherently challenging, and layering with a CRA and the uncertainty as to whether the city would support a conditional rezoning of residential to industrial. I think the plans were only developed so far, and it put them at a disadvantage to be able to accurately articulate some of the reasoning behind it, and perhaps their improved coordination between staff and the applicant's team about some of the logistical or the operational needs of the particular company. I think clearly in hindsight, I think we might have both made different choices as to how we brought this forward. So I appreciate your grace in giving this a second go, and it sounds like we're in a much better position today than we were 2 weeks ago.
No, I was just going to echo that I do feel like there's tons of clarity here. So love the clarity, love the plans, love this project, love the shoes. I'm all in favor, so.
You want to make the motion?
Oh, sure. Why not? I'll make the motion. The first motion, is it? Yes, it is. Now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Commission recommends approval of the request of 1639 Madison LLC, Josh Strouts, I hope I pronounced that correctly, perfect, for approval of a conditional rezoning agreement for 1639 Madison Avenue Southeast for the following reasons. The proposed zone, district, and conditional rezoning offer is identified as industrial flex in the Southtown Business Area Specific Plan, intended to include industrial uses to better accommodate changing needs of industrial areas and support business growth, entrepreneurship, workforce training, and economic activity. Will provide reasonable accommodation for growth and development, supporting the objectives in Chapter 5 of the 2002 Master Plan relative fostering a strong economy, and is consistent with the TNLDR zone district because the applicant has voluntarily offered a conditional rezoning agreement which would subject the property to certain conditions and restrictions, limiting future use and development on the property. The proposed new zone district is compatible with the zone districts and neighborhood classification in the neighborhood because adequate setbacks and landscape buffering will be provided from neighboring residential uses. The site and building will be designed to reflect SDIT zone district site layout and building element requirements consistent with the adjacent property to the north. The conditional rezoning will allow the property and surrounding area to retain the benefits of the current TN LDR zone district while adapting to support sensitive redevelopment. The physical, geological, hydrological, and other environmental features of the property to be rezoned are compatible with the full range of uses in the proposed zone district because the property is of adequate size to support the proposed use and was previously used to support industrial uses. The proposed development will not be detrimental to the financial stability and economic welfare of the city because the establishment of the use of the property will further develop this area as a hub of economic activity, providing local residents with employment opportunities and local businesses with an opportunity for growth. The proposed zone district and conditional rezoning will bear a reasonable and rational connection and/or benefit to the property to be rezoned because the previous use of the property was associated with an industrial use. The proposed zone district and conditional rezoning will result in a better development than would have been likely if the property had been rezoned without a zoning agreement or if the property were left to develop under the existing zone district because the CRA provides a better transition to the residential neighborhood. The uses permitted in the SDIT zone district could have a greater negative impact in the proposed use and site plan. The proposed zone district and conditional rezoning are necessary to allow the rezoning to be approved because rezoning of the subject property will be inappropriate without conditions as offered by the applicant given the residential zoning of the surrounding properties. The proposed zone district and conditional rezoning are clearly in the public interest as compared to the existing zone district, and considering the site-specific land use or conditions proposed by the applicant because the development will provide jobs and economic growth while protecting adjacent residential uses, and any future expansion will require amendment to the agreement, and development of this property would likely not occur without the agreement. And that's...
I'll support.
We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Any further Planning Commission discussion? And we'll open up for public comment for anyone who would like to address the commission. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment and we're adjourned.
Wait, you went too quick. Not official business. City staff will begin thinking about your Planning Commission retreat that we typically hold in late August. Maybe internally we'll brainstorm a few ideas, and then in the meantime, if you could think of some things that you might like to either learn about or hear about, and then we will send out an email and start building what that could look like for you. That was all.
Are you taking any ideas for locations, like
Yeah.
a Dude Ranch or something in Jackson Hole?
wait.
Or
Okay, no. Perhaps you'd look at the planning department budget and see why. No, nothing like that. Locally, I know.
For some of us who haven't been here as long as others, you mind just reminding us of some of the topics that we've done in the past?
Yep, so we've done a bus tour a couple of times, I think. We've done a bus tour where we went out and looked at a bunch of different developments that had been approved either administratively or by the Planning Commission, kind of experienced a little bit differently to say, like, is this what you thought it would be? What were the lessons learned? We were able to take tours of a couple of facilities as well, just for general interest as to what's happening. Sometimes you guys see it in plan review and you hear about what it's going to be, but you don't always get to experience what it is afterwards. I think we've done trainings, although I don't remember what it was about. And then I also know that we've done, we had a master plan conversation before we kicked off the plan. It was before that, maybe?
And we did a building heights tour specifically,
Yep,
and a marijuana facility tour.
yep, thank you.
No sign program tours yet.
Are there any anticipated changes to our ordinance that you expect to come out of some of the recommendations in the draft master plan that maybe we should think about more deeply before final adoption?
Okay, so I'm sure, yes, there would be, especially in the housing area. So yeah, we could pull out a few of those.
I mean, it might be useful to look back on what was just adopted, but if there are things that, additional changes that you could foresee that maybe we could think about, see examples of, that would be useful.
Yep.
I do like the idea of doing something like mobile as well. I think the last couple retreats have been, yeah, so
Okay.
love to get back out there.
Good to know. All right. Well, we'll put together a couple of ideas, but maybe noodle on that over the next couple of weeks, and we'll start putting something together for you. Thank you.